I'm Don.
I'm LaShelle.
And we are Morrison Madness.
Yes, we are.
So, we thought on this episode that we would talk about the difference between owning a business and working for somebody else.
Sure. Yeah.
So, how many jobs have you had where you were working for somebody else?
Let's see. So I delivered papers. That was my first job. And then I was a lifeguard. And then I worked for Hampshire. And I was a resident assistant. And I was a graduate assistant. And then I worked for honors. And then I've been a graduate assistant in a couple different positions now in my PhD program.
So you've had like 10 jobs.
Something like that, yeah.
I've had like 50.
I know. But you have like 4 at the same time.
Sometimes.
Yes. It's crazy.
I get bored easy.
Yeah. I didn't have a bunch of different jobs ever. Like I would have... Like I did paper delivery and lifeguarding at the same time. But yes, I've been going to school during most of this. So, right. But and then like when I guess I also worked for another karaoke company, DJ company. I never did general DJ for them, but I did karaoke for them. But that was just a hobby for fun kind of thing.
Well, we don't have time for me to try and list all the jobs I've had, but
no, we don't.
I've worked all the fast foods.
That would take the whole episode.
I've worked pizza. I've worked construction, all different kinds of construction. Drove truck, sales, lots of sales.
Yeah.
Bartending.
And that's the stuff. I've never done sales and I've never worked fast
DJing,
food.
Bouncing, security. I was in the military.
Right.
I grew up farming. I've worked in auto shops, doing light mechanic stuff. Gas attendant, cashier. I've been a driver for a shuttle.
For the airport shuttle. Yep. And you've worked in a hotel now, too.
Well, when I was a driver, I've been a driver for other things.
Sure.
Doing other types of delivery stuff.
Sure. You've had a lot of different kinds of jobs.
Yes. So my favorite job of all time was probably working in a pet store. I started there working in the fish department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were known as the fish guy.
I was known as the fish guy.
Every so often, people are still like, "You're the fish guy. I remember you."
Or they'll be like, "You look really familiar. Where do I know you from?" Well, I used to own Petticoat. That's right. I bought my lizard from you.
Yes.
Or I bought my bird from you.
Or snake, or something along those lines. Yes, absolutely.
So, working for other people. We listed off, a lot of that. Now, what about businesses? How many businesses have you owned?
Well, technically, I am an interpreter, which is a business in and of itself. I only do subcontracting usually. I don't like to contract out my own jobs.
But you
easier. Do. Once in a while, I do. But it's easier for me and
right.
Just in general.
We'll get into that later. But
to go through an agency, and so then the agency pays me kind of idea. And then owning Star Entertainment. Mm-hmm. And now this job, Morrison Madness, that we've started as a company. So 3.
And how many of them make money?
Star Entertainment. Interpreting could, but I've never done interpreting full time.
No, right.
And so, again, I have the interpreting. I'm actually a licensed interpreter. I have an EIPA license. So I can legitimately go out and interpret, but I don't do it full time. I do it sporadically, and then when there's a lull on other things, I will interpret more. But yeah, right. So I can make money with it. I just choose not to. If that makes sense.
I have owned, 6 businesses. So I owned Pet Degree was the first business I owned. And I bought that with Jill, my first wife. Mm-hmm. And then I had that for, I worked there before I owned it. I worked there for 3 or 4 years before I bought it. So in all, I was there 12 years.
Okay.
And then not too long from there, I went and worked for the federal government. And then before I left the federal government, I started doing on the side, I started a business. A friend of mine helped me get it set up called Curb Appeal. Kind of doing handyman stuff, but mainly focusing on pet stuff. So walking people's dogs. When people would go on vacation, I would take care of their cats, clean people's fish tanks, take care of their birds, their reptiles when they would go on vacation. We live in a college town, so there's a big call for that kind of thing.
Right.
And I had that for about 4 years. And then...
But that kind of morphed into do more, didn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. When I met you, we kind of expanded on that into other things. And then I in changing it into Do More Enterprises, I did a lot more construction stuff.
Yeah.
And then at the same time that we did that, we started Star Entertainment.
Right.
And originally I owned Star Entertainment, and then we switched and transferred it to you.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how that all came about. Like, because we had talked about putting it in my name from the get-go, and for some reason that's not how the paperwork got filled out or something that way. It was weird. So.
Well, and we originally talked that we were going to set it up as a partnership, and it just never got set up that way. It was just me as the owner, and then I feel like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, we switched it over into your name.
Right.
And then in 2014, well, actually way before that, in like 2000, in 97 or 8, I became a partner in a game store selling Magic cards.
Yeah.
And then I found out that the guy that I had gone into business with kind of took all the money that I put into the business and went off and was partying. He was a college kid.
Gotcha.
And so I kind of closed up the shop and tried to incorporate it into my pet store, but since I was the only one who knew anything about him, it didn't really work.
Right.
So I had this whole store's worth of Magic cards kind of in my basement for a long time.
Right.
And then in 2014,
I
went in with another person as a partnership, and right at the same time that we opened, another game store opened, and you and I were getting ready to leave and go on a trip because you had a conference.
I had a conference, yeah.
In Europe, and we were going to be gone for 3 weeks, and the property flooded and the building leaked, and we had nothing but problems.
Yep.
And we tried a couple of different locations, and we just never could get it to take off, and he was busy doing his PhD.
Your partner was, yeah. Yep.
And at this point, he kind of just walked away from everything.
But you still have it. It's just only online.
It doesn't really make... Well, I have a physical location, but because of the virus, we're not open.
Right.
It really doesn't make any money to pay myself out of. It makes enough money to pay its rent.
Yeah.
and buy new inventory, and that's about it. And then...
But again, I feel like if you spent, full-time plus work on it, it would make money.
Yeah, the issue that we always run into is that the events for that type of a store usually are on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night.
Right.
And that's when we're the busiest with Star Entertainment.
Right.
And
Star Entertainment makes more money than what the game store would.
Correct.
In general, and so we focus on Star Entertainment instead.
Correct.
And Star Entertainment didn't pay us for the longest time. It broke even. It made money in order to invest in equipment and build the business up, and then now...
Right, because there was a big expense getting started. We had to buy all of the equipment and then buy programs to run on computers and buy... Computers are part of the equipment, but then we had... Even though I had a huge library of CDs, because I had DJ'd off and on and just am a music person and collected, music CDs... We had to spend a lot of money buying karaoke songs and updating our music library. It was a long time before it could be where it needed to be.
Right.
To where we could start paying ourselves.
Yeah.
So.
But we're at that point now that we're able to pay ourselves a little bit.
Right.
So, which is exciting.
Not a ton. I mean,
no.
It's not something you and I could both live off of if you didn't have your GA position and student loans while you're going to school.
Right.
It wouldn't be enough to pay all of our bills.
Correct.
So now we've kind of laid out the groundwork of the fact that we've both had different jobs. And honestly, growing up farming, while that was a job to me, it was, I worked for my dad. I did go work for other people.
Right.
But technically, that was our family business.
Right. Well, and we didn't really talk much about Morrison Madness, which is what you're listening to us here on, that we started that in 2020 during the pandemic because our Star Entertainment company was completely shut down.
Right.
And so we invested in the equipment in order to have this podcast and kind of created an online platform for people to connect with us, because we've had a lot of people that know us from Star Entertainment that wanted to know more about us personally, not just our business. And so that's kind of where Morrison Madness grew out of, but Morrison Madness has yet to make a penny at all.
No, it hasn't even paid for any of its equipment.
No, not at all. So at this point, it's really more of a hobby, but we have set it up to where it can be a business if we get enough following and things that way that we can actually monetize.
Right. We don't want to be the next Kardashians, but it would be nice to have enough followers that it paid for itself.
Right.
And we do, we're building classes to have online classes for.
Online courses, yeah.
We've published a couple of them, but there's more that we're working on.
Well, and part of that comes from, again, our past experiences and our knowledge that we have. It kind of works out well to build those. And so that's another area that we already have a vast knowledge of, a wide variety of things that we can teach, as well as the fact that I am going to school to learn about teaching. And so then I can kind of incorporate that and use those skills and knowledge to help create those courses to hopefully help others, because that's one of the big things that I enjoy doing.
Right.
So, anyway.
So, of the two different things, working for somebody else, working for yourself, which one do you prefer? And I wouldn't go into, why, just, which one do you prefer?
That's a tough question, because there's no definitive one or the other for me. There's certain things that I enjoy about working for myself, and there's certain things I enjoy about working for someone else. I can tell you that in working for someone else, I would much rather do more of a salary position than an hourly paid position. I know that for me as a person, I just work better on a salary type job with more flexible hour kind of idea. Not that you're not primarily working the 8 to 5, but not having to punch a clock, feeling like I'm always, trying to rush to get there in that specific minute or something along those lines. I didn't enjoy with any of the jobs that I had. But the salary position jobs that I have, I enjoy more. And it could just be that it's not the salary, it's just the type of work. I'm not sure, but it's not as stressful for me in that sense. But then for the difference between working for somebody else and working for myself, I enjoy being able to, again, having the flexibility to a certain extent for hours. But there's things that are nice to just be able to go, that's above my pay grade. Like, that's not my responsibility. That's a boss's responsibility, and I don't have to stress about it. Where when it's your own company, you are in charge of everything. And so then there's a lot of things that come into play. So then that's stressful.
I've only worked a couple of jobs where it was a true salaried position. Like when I worked for the federal government, you have a salary, but if you don't get your 40 hours in, they deduct from that.
Right.
So it's not really a true salary. You're still an hourly employee.
Right. Well, and the salary jobs that I've had, you work your hours and you end up working usually more than the 40 hours a week. So it's kind of...
The thing I didn't like about the salaried position is there were times when I wasn't motivated to go out and do the job that I was supposed to be doing.
No, I see.
So,
yeah, I could see that.
The biggest one that comes to mind was a sales job. I had a route that included all of Iowa and part of Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois, a little bit of South Dakota. And there were days when it was just hard to get motivated to get out the door. Once I was out the door and on the road, I didn't have a problem.
Right.
But sometimes it was hard, especially when I had little kids at home.
But if you were not working for someone else, if for some reason you had your own product and you were selling it, do you think you would have the same difficulty, or is it good going, driving, selling, being out of town for a few days at a time that was the issue?
No, it was the fact that I didn't have that hourly thing of, I've got to get so many hours in to make so much money.
Gotcha.
I mean, I made bonuses based on sales, but I had a flat salary, a base salary.
Gotcha.
And the same thing at the car dealership. And then, you had a set salary, and then you got bonuses based on cars that you sold.
Sure.
Well, their bonus system was never motivated me to go in earlier to come home late.
Right. No, that makes sense. So, and again, I've never worked sales, and none of my jobs have had like a bonus system where it's salary and then you get a bonus for something. I haven't had that. The salary was the salary. So you just worked until the job was done. And it was usually project work. There's a project coming up and there's some sort of deadline with that project. And so you're working on that project or multiple projects, and then you have to get it done within a certain deadline kind of idea. And that's what you're working against. And so it's very similar to school.
Working an hourly job, even if I was in a managerial position, if the owner of the business or the person above me said, hey, somebody called off, we need a shift covered, because I knew I was going to get that extra money, heck yes, I'll come in.
Gotcha.
Or I'll stay late or come in early.
Sure. That makes sense.
So, and you can get caught in a rut of not wanting to go out and promote your business, but
yes,
because you're going to make more money if you promote your business, then that's the motivation to do it.
Sure.
So.
Right. That makes sense. Absolutely. So for you, between working for someone else in a business, which do you prefer?
I prefer to own my own business. I don't have a problem working for other people. I've done it a lot, and I don't have a problem working for somebody older than me or somebody younger than me. I don't have a problem working for men or women. I don't care. If I take a job, whoever my boss is my boss.
Right. Makes sense.
So, the big thing I like about working for myself more than working for somebody else is, at the end of the day, everything that I've put into the company, like let's take Morrison Madness, for instance. If we do this for 5 years and it finally takes off, that's my thing and like Star Entertainment,
right.
Over the 10 years that we've been in business.
It is 10 years this year. Yeah.
We've built up our inventory of equipment. If, in 20 years, how much farther will we have built up our inventory of equipment, our inventory of music,
right,
all of that kind of stuff, then, I can sell that.
Sure.
As part of my retirement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how I look at it. When it's different, if you are working for a corporate job that has benefits, but in this day and age, how many people stay at a job for
right
20, 30, 40 years to where you get your retirement? If
right.
you're not working in a government thing where you've, can get a retirement after 20 or 25 years.
Right.
It's not the same as it was in the 40s and 50s.
No,
60s.
There were a lot of people that were very surprised when I left honors that I had been there for almost 10 years. It was just shy of 10 years. And there was tons of people, both in the university and outside the university, that were just surprised that, that was my first quote unquote adult job after graduating from college. And I stayed with it for almost 10 years. And the reason I left was to go back to school, not to go to a different job kind of thing. And so it was, that's not a normal thing
right.
for people anymore. You spend, 2 to 5 years tops, and 5 is a long time, it seems like, for most people to be in a position somewhere.
It is nowadays.
So, yeah.
It didn't used to be. That's
right.
the thing.
Right. So anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to have more podcasts talking about owning...
More episodes.
More episodes. Sorry. More episodes about businesses and owning businesses and kind of the trials and tribulations and the...
Versus working for somebody else.
Right.
Right.
And things that are great, things that are struggling, and kind of let you in on it, some insights, especially since Don has owned several businesses and several different types of businesses. And so you kind of have general knowledge of what's needed and things that way for that. So we're going to go into some more detail on that with some upcoming episodes. We hope you enjoy this. Let us know if you've ever owned a business or thought about owning a business, if you're curious about stuff, if there's certain questions that you have, and we'll see if we can't get them into the podcast or we'll answer those questions directly online as well. So make sure you're commenting, liking, sharing, definitely, especially on YouTube, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, all of those kinds of things, and we will see you on the next episode.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.